Apologies, my hair is a massive mess. I'm hoping that if I just grow it out like a little bit more, it will just correct itself down the line, but who knows how that will work out. I think it's like destined to just look like crap, even if I shower, like literally that doesn't even, it just kind of like frays it out more and makes it look even more. Anyway, but yeah. I'm assuming you're here to hear about books. So today I'm going to be talking about Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy. And this is the companion novel to The Passenger, which came out in the same year. They were released, I believe, coterminously. So it was like 2022, I want to say, when they. So this is basically McCarthy's last novel, I believe. Like I think it was, he had it in his mind to write a novel concerning like a woman character, Alicia Western, he was thinking about writing about that and like a physicist and like a mathematician kind of topics involving that for about 50 years. So I think since at least maybe the 70s. So yeah, that seed of an idea took form, and then and then he finally came out with this. And Stella Maris is basically it focuses more strictly actually just on Alicia Western, and it takes place in the namesake of the hospital, Stella Maris, which is a trying to find the right word to describe it. It's like a mental. I don't want to say it's a loony bin is where they throw schizoids and schizophrenics, but it is definitely like a kind of institution, I guess. Because it's it's hard. Like she's hallucinating, right, and she's seeing these characters, like and so basically it takes place in the early 70s, I think, and it catalogs her visits and kind of in the kind of takes on the shape of the format of like a little bit almost like a play, like a like what you might see on a script kind of written out but without like exposition, but strictly just the dialogue. So you'll hear like or you'll see kind of like very simple minimal markings, like it just like paragraph breaks, and like there's no chapter breaks, but it does, the way it progresses is like linear. So well, maybe not so linear, but in the subject matter is anything but so yeah, there is. So basically Alicia Western is a mathematician, child prodigy, extremely bright, but also fairly troubled. Like she's very much her brother Bobby Western, who I think they both were named after like Alicia. Bobby, I think, were like, I can't remember. It was like some kind of the reason their father they named them as like a bit of an inside joke. I think after, I can't remember the names. I don't know if it was after a physicist, but her father too was like a bright, very prodigious, bright and eminent physicist in his own right too, and that's kind of where I guess she takes it after him. And he worked in on the development of the atomic bomb. So that was a very there was a lot of different like guilt, and like he felt after the in like the 40s, all the way leading up to the little boy in the Nagasaki and Hiroshima, obviously that, and like just how intense and how mournful you might have felt after like this like radically world shifting, literally, because like like she was talking about how her father and their team, they had to like put on these very high kind of things that could, because it was the blinding light, and like also like just not to mention the noise of it too, like just like the splitting of an atom, like a very simple down to like a fission of the atom, and like how that you know how that results in just like complete, just utter chaos, and out of Pandora's box. And like she talks about her kind of like a secondhand guilt and like what she felt, and like how her father moved away and like didn't kind of died at an early age. And I think and then, but she also talks about Bobby Western, that Bobby went more into physics rather than just strict pure mathematics, because this is showing my lack of how much I know about mathematics, because I was not, it was not my strong suit growing up, but I still, I have a soft spot for certain aspects of it, geometry, stuff like that, because it's more visual, I guess. Um, but but memorizing, like, not necessarily theorems, but anything to do with like higher stuff, like beyond algebra, even algebra too, but stuff like that, or like anything to do with like calculus too. That's like way out of my league. Anyway, but yeah, this is yeah, his her brother Bobby, of which the passenger focused more on. Passenger was like a lot longer of a novel. This one was like, a couple hundred pages. An easy breeze of a read. But obviously the subject matter is, it gets pretty obscure and arcane. But there, I think he went into physics because that was more of a sensorial kind of thing, and he had to see things, and he was better at maybe visualizing certain aspects, and he was more of a kind of a daredevil. He had a bit of a knack for daredevil. I mean, he wasn't completely thoughtless, but but then again, there was the whole aspect of him going off to Europe, Italy, like racing cars. I think I mentioned that in the passenger, but he got in a coma because he actually crashed the car, and that he was induced into a coma. And there was a very pivotal moment in Alicia's life when she was asked to give the okay to like pull the plug on that, and that she just ran away, and she felt awful because she couldn't, stand to see that. But luckily he survived, and kind of recovered, and basically went back, and then starts, I think that's when he starts and like kind of what's the word, salvage diving. Yeah, that's right. Another kind of risky kind of career that gets him a little bit in trouble. But so Alicia talks about her hallucinations more in detail, whereas I think they kind of show up in the passenger, and like you're kind of left more to the imagination. But this is more, she's like describing it, like she's like telling her psychiatrist, Dr. Cohen, that like, yes, I see these, I like, it's not like just like this dream imagery of like, oh, they're archetypal metaphysical impressions. Like, sorry, let me just get slightly more. Okay. Yeah, they're not just these super vague, wistful, I guess, like, they're a little more discreet, and like she said that I can literally see the hairs on their nose of these characters, especially the Thalandine kid, who is the most prominent of them. And he comes with a cast of characters, and then he's always talking about like putting on a show. He teases her a lot, but it's kind of like he's the only one that she can really confide in at the end of the day. That she feels that way, at least. That he's like a confidant, in that he has, while he's like agitates and, excuse the squeaking chair, and that while he's a trickster kind of motif as well, and that she talks about like being how she kind of fell into her inception of kind of the curiosity of like mathematics, and like getting into obscure philosophy, like the subject of George Berkeley, the Bishop George Berkeley, Berkeley, I think. Or is it? I think I've heard it pronounced Berkeley, but then again, there's Berkeley, California, which is named after him, so it's kind of an interesting kind of thing. But yeah, he was the Irish philosopher that kind of proponent of immaterialism, in response to kind of these materialist kind of concepts that he saw, and he was about 17th century, I want to say, around the times of Leibniz, and he was an interesting character in and of himself, because he was for immaterialism, but not total solipsism. Like, he was like, everything that we see is a visage of something. Like, everything we see is like a reflection of, like, there's always going to be some like refraction, or everything in the ultimate, like perception and interpretation. Like everything you see, there is no like Platonic kind of going back to the forms of the perfect form, or there's no like perfect reality of like out, like that's hinged to the truth. But like truth for him was more of like God is that material truth. The God is the only thing that's truly like like a sure thing, reality, surefire, like something that you can anchor to, and that for him was the only thing leading him from total nihilism and like but for materialism, they're like the antithesis to that kind of Berkeley's ideas was more of almost atheistic, and he was talking about how in his treatise, I think it was called the Treatise of it was a pretty quick read that I did recently, so you'd think I'd be able to deduce more, I'd be able to kind of recall that information. But with that treaty on, I think it's the treatise on the empirical, on the idea of human knowledge, I think, and he essentially, establishes his thought on, on how immaterialism bodes well, that it actually can help you in the real world. And it's like, it is a bit, because it's almost like life is kind of a dream. It's like dreamed out. It's like it is, but in giving yourself to the certainty of like Christ or God and religion, there is like some saving force, and that's the only thing that's a sure thing. And even then you have to do a bit of a Kierkegaardian leap of faith. But regardless of that, there's still some semblance of certainty with that. And it's like everything else is just, like a dreamy, immaterial product of your imagination, and like everything, and all these conversations that you have take place within the context of your mind. And in a sense, that's like a little bit similar to the later on, I guess, German idealists, or idealists in general, where everything is but an idea and there's no proving. And then, Schopenhauer, even Hegel, despite their differences, and Kant especially was kind of like the forerunner, like the kind of OG German idealist. But they all had interesting things. They had ethics too. They had a way of like, okay, I think the fourfold root of reason, which Schopenhauer is like, I think had an addendum to later on. But I think, this whole idea that everything is within the, there is a priori knowledge for sure things, like knowledge of history, like Julius Caesar, is said to have existed, like that stuff. There's a priori, like certainties that we can allude to or hinge on in some sense, but like there's also the a posteriori, I think. But there's also, I think, the principium of individuantes, which is like the thing in itself. The thing in itself is basically that thing that has another name, noumenon. That, and it's not quite as dark as it sounds, because it's like, but it is mysterious by nature, and it's something that, it's a thing that exists independent of our knowledge, I think. So independent of anything. So anyway, but yeah, this is the whole thing of what, product of me on and off doing like researching philosophy and all that. But so Alicia Western has, stumbled upon Berkeley, and then that shook her whole world. She's very, very like a prodigious reader. She's like talking about reading literally like, I think like 5 books, like 3 books a day or something, just like absolutely like, something so like you'd almost imagine it's like, sounds like almost a bit like not like unbelievable, but like somebody like Alicia Western exists only in a vacuum of like extremely rare on this fringe of society, just brilliant kind of she was like talking about like her doubts of mathematics too, and that like all these physicists like John von Neumann or Dedekind, I think his name was, or but also Cantor too, like like George Cantor, no, not Cantor, but also Kurt Gödel, the Gödel. He, in his like incompleteness theorem is the only thing I really know of him, and a couple like number file kind of videos that I watched. But yeah, he's very interesting. I think Roger Penrose has probably the best that I've seen takes on Kurt Gödel, and his I guess, second guessing, or his doubts of mathematics and like its ability to every theorem that is, and it's not just like a Russell kind of set of all possible sets, or that, set theory, but it's also this idea that in logic, this is why I think around the time of Wittgenstein and around the time of like of whom Western says that she was like a pretty big like that was almost a blood brother to her. But yeah, I think with this, she took more to Gödel in that she was at first talking about like being a mathematical Platonist, I think, and that she was like, I think, doubtful that Platonism at first, that I think she says she was, but then she kind of gave into it because it was like the only thing that kind of had any kind of hope to it. But yeah, like very, very cerebral, very, very. This book gets quite, and I'm not doing it justice and doing it. The only way to really read it is to kind of read it, and but yeah, it's like it's a kind of a smaller book, but it's packed with a lot of different, not just analogies and theorems, and but like but also very just introspective, kind of mulling over like like what like what was was is physics, like all these things, like, oh, it's just an idea, it's just an abstract idea, like ought does not equal is in a Humean classic sense, like this idea that just saying something is like, well, yeah, the physics is just an idea in our head, it's a theorem and it's abstractions, but once you play that out, it leads to the death of all these people, and it's like, like how do you deal with that? And Oppenheimer, whom gets a kind of mention in this, obviously spiked in popularity this year because the Nolan film, obviously, which I loved. I liked it. I think it did justice, and I think it deserves the hype, I think. But yeah, the whole like that arc of like this that he struggled with. It's like of having to witness himself like the disasters in real time playing out, like, and how, and like, and that some people could just live with it, and like Truman like was just like like stop whining about it, like just live with it, it's like it's not your fault, I ordered that bomb, I ordered, but like Oppenheimer's the one he felt responsible because like there was a more, I don't know, there was more theoretical through the like doing the legwork and the brain work of the physics, doing all that heady cerebral kind of work on like that kind of led to the but anyway, but so yeah, Alicia Western, and then I'm trying to think of the note that it ends, but she also talks about music too, and that music that she was like practicing violin, and that's actually a point that they actually talked about in The Passenger, was that she was trying to buy this, I believe it's called an Armani violin, and very old, like literally like Baroque period Armani $400,000 violin that she was like bargaining to talk down to like $250,000 or something like that, and that the money that her parents entrusted to her, where it was actually most of that went toward the violin that she felt like very strong about. And yeah, that was an interesting point too, like music and how music has, how Schopenhauer too, like thought that music and God were the, or I'm sorry, not God, definitely not God, but music and art were the only two certain like instantiations of like the will to, like there was the will to life, which meant like just struggle and striving, and like there was no, it was brutish, right? And from what I remember him describing it, and he was very against Leibniz and his like the best of all possible worlds, because we live in what the God that when the architect of God designed, and that's because in Schopenhauer's just like, hell no, or the world's horrible, it's like it's ill-suited, people like not just human beings, but like animals, like wolves, like these like dogs, for no other reason, just like completely just cycle, and they tear the backs off these turtles. I think he was talking about. There's another German like I think a German kind of polymath that was like traveling around the world, the natural world, and it was like just like talking about the natural sciences of things, and he was like talking about how these dogs, they killed these turtles and like in a really brutal, like insatiable, vicious way. And yeah, and he was talking about how like after they were done, like they were just like like this cycle repeats itself, and that's the only thing that was like aside from that was that the in the intimations, or like the like of music and like an art as a whole, or poetry, because poetry is a way of almost coping with real life by kind of um obfuscating through a lens of like of like subjectivity in analysis rather than just a strict rational analysis. And that's why poetry has how much meaning, and actually has more meaning, you would argue, than like a IRS kind of tax code book or something, like that has factual evidence, or it has factual, maybe epistemology even in that sense, but or strict histories. But poetry like Rilke, or Heinrich Heine, or who's the other man? I think Schiller, like Goethe, that has more meaning, and Schopenhauer's at least. And I agree for the most part, yeah. But yeah, that's anyway. That is Stella Mars. That is more of a. I know it's more of a. I went down the route of like more. I thought that I didn't know this would be this long. I thought I'd do like just a 10-minute video, but I figured I'd pack in some stuff about that, because the book does include a lot of different obscure philosophies and theories and physics, and yeah, definitely all of that's kind of mixed in. And but yeah, I definitely recommend that if you have. It's definitely a worthwhile read, and I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.